Just let me know once you guys can see my screen. Can you all see my screen? Is my screen visible, guys?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So yesterday we had a quick introduction about, we spoke about an ERP, what is an ERP, what are the characteristics of an ERP system, and what kind of ERP vendors that we have in the market. Then the history of SAP, and also kind of modules that we have in SAP. So, and also a very very basic overview about an SD cycle that we will have. So this is what we have discussed in our yesterday's class. So today, so we'll just continue from there. We'll continue our discussion on here what we have discussed so far. So now basically, like, what we will be, I just created some sort of a very very basic presentation for you guys this morning when I woke up, which was an earlier presentation that we have. So I'll try to cover few things, and then we'll jump into the SD topics of it. Okay, all this is fine. This all we have discussed. This is all fine. Okay. uh, we will basically talk about kind of an architecture that we have. Okay, the architecture of an SAP system. Here I was just talking about an R1, R2, R3 and all, right? So what is this R1, R2 and R3? So we will actually talk about maybe in kind of a high level detail for you to understand. So when SAP started R1, so which is nothing but R stands for real time. Okay, it's a real-time system, and it's based on it was kind of one tier architecture, which is in generally whenever we are talking about an architecture of an SAP, you'll always have to remember, okay, there is a kind of a presentation layer. Presentation layer is a layer, like, we actually look into it. Okay, so whenever you open an SAP system, so you will have something like a presentation. For example, like, you will have some sort of a GUI, just to show a very high level example. So let's say you log into your SAP system, and let's say I'll take one of my SAP systems that I have. Maybe I'll just take let's say I log into one of the SAP systems that we have here. So the first screen that appears, it's called the GUI. So basically, like, you will have this the it's GUI is nothing but the graphical user interface. So this is an interface where you open your application. So this is kind of your presentation layer that you will have. Okay, and again, in behind, whenever you execute any of the transaction codes or any of the reports that you run, so there is an application that runs. So there will be, like, an application that runs. Okay, there is some programming that runs in the background. So that is called an application layer that you will have. And whenever there's an application that runs, whenever you do some transactions, whenever you do some reports and all, everything gets stored in a separate layer called a database layer. Okay, so basically any of anything that you have will have a presentation layer, an application layer, and a database layer behind it. So in a one tier architecture, what used to happen is, it used to be like, like all the three used to be in the let's say it used to be in the same instance, like, which means, for example, you can take as example as our computers that we used to have, and maybe an Excel that we used to run, just to imagine. Because the Excel, the presentation layer that you access would be same. The application, the application layer is also an Excel that gets open in your system that you are getting installed. And again, the database layer is again your hard disk where you used to store them. So that's how the SAP used to learn, where all the database, application, and presentation layer used to actually run and save on the same same instance that we call it. So then what happened then later on in 1979, there is again, when the technology has come up, and all, then they started doing this, the two-tier architecture that we call it. We have something called a two-tier architecture, R2, where the presentation layer used to be separate, where you will be able to access them, whereas your application layer and your database layer used to be used to be in a separate instance that we have. For example, now you have your mobile phones with certain apps. So the presentation on your phones when you install a particular app is on your desktop, it is on your phone, but the application that runs behind and also the database that where it gets stored is kind of it's not on your mobile, right? So they have their own servers where it gets stored. For example, certain apps that you use, maybe kind of Facebook or something from your mobile phone, or any as of now, in the real time, as of now, any of the cloud based applications that you have. So all this will have like presentation layer, that is getting where you will be accessing, whereas the application, the database layer will be storing somewhere else. So that's how it used to be. Even today, the cloud-based application, most of the cloud-based applications are also based on the two-tier architecture that you will have. But the R3, whenever it starts, it's again real-time data processing in the three-tier architecture. Three-tier architecture means the presentation layer is one of the server where you access them, whereas your application that runs will be another server, whereas again the database layer is another server. So it's basically like you will have different system servers that are connected to each other, like in an R3 system where presentation, the application, the database will be in a separate servers. It will not be in the same server. So that is how the current R3 architecture works. So you will have something like a presentation layer now they have, and you'll have applications running on those, but they're in a different server. So all those can be integrated with each other. And again, the database, again, they will have kind of a separate database that would be there, and all the applications from all the computers are actually connected together. I have actually kind of a very beautiful diagram explaining this R1, R2, and R3. But I will be just sharing with you in the later point of time, because as of now I don't have them. I have another desktop, so where you will have a clear picture of an understanding, like with the help of some computers, how an R1 or R2 or an R3 works. So I'll try to share it with you guys maybe in the coming weeks, because I need to, because I'm not there in my place at the moment. So yeah, so we'll try to connect. I'll try to share with you. I remember this point, so maybe in the coming weeks when I have the data with me, I'll just share with you to explain in more detail to understand. But I hope you guys already got an high level picture about the architecture here. So basically, you always have to remember there's a presentation layer, there's an application layer, and the database layer. So database layer is kind of a backend that you will have, and presentation layer is a front end that you have. In between the backend and the front end, so there will be an application layer that would be running, and this application layer will be the one, like that will be executing that any programs that we execute and everything will be in the application layer. And whenever it needs to fetch some data, it goes to the database layer to get the data. And the presentation layer is your GUI. You call it the graphical user interface. That's the look and feel of an SAP system that the users or we will be able to see it. Clear?
Yes.
Yeah. And we call it something called an IDES system. Okay, so basically, like just for you to understand, because let's say you're getting trained and you don't have any prior SAP experience, as such, you'll always have to remember, okay, whenever you log into your SAP system, but I will again talk about it in detail, but already just giving you a very high level overview. So whenever you try to log into your SAP system, okay, you will get an access. You need to install this SAP logon. Then when you log into your system, so whenever you log in, you have something called a client. Okay, there is something called a client, and you give your user ID and your password here, then your logon language. So all this you give. Always remember, like in your IDES system, which is basically is nothing but your IDES system is basically your demo system that we call them. Okay, it's for the demonstration purpose that you will have. So anything that has this IDES system, the demonstration system that you will have the client as 800 or something. It starts with 8. But you always have to remember, because if in case, let's say, there are some there are some people who get trained and might be don't have real-time experience, but whenever you talk to your client and all, for your interview, they may ask you, like, based on, it depends upon kind of knowledge that they show, but sometimes they ask you, can you tell me what is the kind of a client that you used to work on? So you should never say, because in your demo systems and all, you will be always seeing 800. So that will not be in the real time. So this is only for the demo purpose and all. In our systems, you will see the client as 800, but in the real time, all the clients will start with either 100 or 010 or 400 or any numbers like that, but not starting with 8 series, because anything that has an 8 is kind of a demo system or a practice system. So if you say 800, then they will understand, okay, you don't have any real-time experience. Basically, you're just got trained, because this client that they will have, it's only for the for our practice purpose, or for the demonstration purpose, or that you will have, but not, this client will not be used in terms of the real time. But we will talk in more detail about some clients and all, in the when we talk about the project. But just give you a high level, a high level understanding of a client here, 800, because I have mentioned ideas here, about a system. So just giving you kind of an idea about this. Clear? Okay, then might be I will just go to okay, uh, this is again talking about the same architecture that try to explain you. uh, okay, uh, all right, so maybe now what, so if you're clear with the architecture, then I will maybe explain you about the, let's say, system landscape. Okay, so this is again, during the project, we'll again talk about in detail about the system landscape, but understand, like, like in the in like, in your demo system now, you will not have multiple landscapes, so you'll be practicing on one system that you will have. Like, with the client that you will have, you will get an access here, and you'll be working on this particular client, like, with your user ID and password, you will be working on them and you will be discussing them. But in reality, you should also understand, we will have kind of, there will be something called, whenever there's coming to the system landscape, there are multiple SAP systems that you will have, like, uh, that's again purely depends upon how the business want to configure them. They may have some they may have some 5 different systems or 4 different systems. That purely depends upon how business wants to do, and that would be taken during the initial stages of a project, during something we call it as a project preparation. In our methodology, they'll be discussing about the system landscape, but we will discuss more about it during the project. But as of now, from a system landscape, a basic system landscape that we have, let's say, will have, this is the minimum that would be there in any project. So you will have a development server, you will have a quality server, then you have a production server. So there can be minimum that is required, whenever we are doing an SAP projects, are 3 different servers that we will have in terms of a landscape, where there will be a development server, there will be a quality server, there will be a production server. For example, the server that you will do all your configurations and everything, for example, this system will be your development system that you will have. So in this system, ideally what happens in kind of a development systems, you do your configurations, whatever is required, whatever is required in terms of your uh, you know uh, like, all the SD configurations that you do, you will do it. Then if in case there are some ABAP work where the technical consultants have to work, they will also work on it. And there will be unit testing that would be done in this system. Once all the unit testing is done, then you will move to from this system, you will move all your changes, all your code changes, all your configuration to another system called a quality system, where in this quality system, not only you, so there will be there'll be FI, everyone will move their changes, and you test them together. like the end-to-end business process. Here you will not be doing any end-to-end business process in a development system. You will just see if in case there are the functionality that you are intended is working fine or not. So once that is done, then an integrated system is where you will be working integrated. The name itself says it's basically kind of integrating with other modules that you have. So there is FICO, there is there is WM, there are different modules. So you do an end-to-end business process in this system. Like once in case the results are fine, you may have, let's say as of now we are talking about only 3 system landscape. Once the integrated testing is done, then you will give it for the UAT. UAT is nothing but user acceptance test. So basically the user will also do a testing on the same system. Once he says, okay boss, I am fine with all my business process, it is working fine, then you move it to your production system. So your prod, which is your production system that you will have, you will move the changes where actually the actual users would work on it. And if in case there are some issues in the production system, they will raise a ticket and you will resolve them. Again the process goes. Then if in case there is a fix that is required, you fix on the development system, then move it to the quality, get an approval, and move to the production system. And the systems, the servers are again divided into number of clients. We will talk about it in detail in the later part. We'll say a separate client for a unit testing, a separate client for let's say configuration. Maybe here you wanted a separate client for an integration testing and UAT, or you may have another system there will be one system for your integration testing, another system for a UAT. So it's during the project we will talk in detail about kind of landscape that would be there. But as of now, just remember, you may in the real time you will have basically 3 different kind of servers. One is a development server, another one is a quality server, another one is a production server. And the changes you do your configuration, and ABAP will do their customizing. Then you do your unit testing in one system. Then once everything is fine, then you move to your quality system for you to work along with the to do an end-to-end testing. Once that is done, then once approval is done, then you give it for the UAT. And once the user accepts this, then you will move to your production system. Then in the production system, if there are some issues, you'll try to resolve them directly. If there are some okay, we'll talk about the different kind of data, different kind of things. If there are some issues that can be solved directly in the production system, which are not anything that is belonging to your customizing or configuration, you directly resolve in your production system. Or if in case there are some issues, then you again make the changes in the development system, move to the quality, then move to the production. Okay. And at the moment, just imagine, whenever you're moving the changes, you can always move the changes from development to quality to production, but not the other way around. You cannot move from product quality to development and all. But there is something called a refresh that we call it, where it is possible to copy the changes from the data that you have in the production system to be copied. That would be done. But ideally, any of the requests that you create, anything that you're making a change, will always flow from a development to a quality to a production. So the flow is only one way. It's not the backward that you will be able to flow the request. Clear on the system landscape that we have?
Yes, sir.
Clear, right? So what is a development system? What do you do in a development system then? So in a development system, you do all the configurations according to the business requirements, and all the configurations will be saved. Just to add on, all the configurations will be saved in certain server tables, and we will have something called a transport request and all, but we will see it in the system to learn it more. So then once everything is saved and according to the business requirements, once you do a unit testing, you move to something called a quality system. Then the quality system is where the changes done in the development server will be copied to something called a quality server for the testing, and you will be doing the testing activities along with other modules that are involved there. like once it is done, then you will give it for the users to test it. In between there are some trainings and all that would happen, but we will talk about only during the project, not at the moment. At the moment you just need to understand the basic landscape that you have. Then you will move to something called a production system. And the production system is where the users will work and will do the regular business activities on day to day. And if there are some issues, they'll reach out to the IT team. Clear? Okay. Just going ahead now, again, yesterday we were talking about a basic sales cycle, right? So I was just talking about a basic sales cycle that we have in NSD. Always remember, anything that you do here, again, this is an important point, anything that you do here in an inquiry or a quotation or a sales order or an outbound delivery or an invoice or anything, is a job of an user. So okay, so it's a job of a user. User means a business user. There will be some business people who will be working on it, to create some sales orders or to create the quotations or to create the inquiries or the outbound deliveries. It's not your job to create them in the production system. We will do for the testing how it is working in our development or in our quality. But in the real time, all this transaction, we call it, we call it as a transaction data. So anything that is related to the transaction data. So we will talk about what are the different kind of data also that we will have is. But all this is is a job of a user, is job of a business user, or we call them as an end user. That's there. So they will be working on it. It's not you who will be working in the real time to create. In the production system, they will create some inquiries. They have their business where they do some quotations, sales orders and all. But your job is doing all the configurations as per the requirement and all the customizing in order for the business to run their transactions. So business will be the one who will be running all these transactions, but to enable them, the IT team is responsible to set up in the backend. So we are responsible for, if in case they say, okay, I have so many plans, we will be responsible for setting up the plans, the sales organizations and everything, in order for them to do their business, in order for them to run their transaction codes. And if in case there are some issues, we are responsible to fix it, as a consultant, to fix those issues that are there in their business process. But you are not responsible for creation of any of these, the transaction data that you will have. Your, as a consultant, your job is to, you know uh, you know uh, do all the configurations as per the business requirement, taking the requirement and getting it developed and all, as well, in order for them to support if in case of some issues that they face. But IT team in the production system will not do any of these activities. It's We are just responsible for the enabling these activities for them to work on it. Clear on that part? I hope I'm clear, or you have some questions. Hopefully no questions, right? Okay, so let's just if in case the system landscape is clear, we'll just move on. Is it clear so far, system landscape and all?
Yes.
Okay, now we will I will also just give you a brief idea about the type of data that you will have in your system. So before we go into the system, so I'll just give you a brief idea about types of data that you will have, because we will be running into them in the system. But okay, I'll just give you an idea about types of data. So in SAP, for example, there are, the broadly we can divide the kind of data into three different parts. The first one that we call it as configuration and customizing data. Okay, and the second part that we call it as master data. And the third one, you call it as transaction data. Okay. So these are the three different type of data. We can categorize all the kind of data into three different parts of the data. So a configuration data or a customizing data is kind of a data like, is something like, it's done in your development system. I said that you have a development server, so that is where we do this configuration and the customizing data. And this is a data that would be done by the configuration data will be done by the functional consultants, and the customizing will be done by the ABAP consultant. So it is basically a job of a consultant. And master data maintenance in the system is, again, it's a job of a user, and this is part of a user in production system. But there will be some activities that we will also get involved in the transaction data and master data, but we'll talk about it in later. So basically there are three different kind of data that you will have. So basically, and also you'll have to remember, now I was mentioning we have development server, quality server, and a production server, right? The configuration data or a customizing data must be done only in development server. You cannot do any of the configuration or customizing in your quality server, or in your let's say in your production server directly. So it's only done in your development server, and you will take a requirements and you do your configurations and or the customizing as per the business requirement. Then you will save them, the changes, in something called a transport request, we call them. So you save all this data in a transport request. Once you save in a transport request, once you do your unit testing, everything is fine, then you move this transport request from your development system to your quality system, from your quality system to your production system, like that. But if in case there are some issues, let's say it's some configuration that is missing or anything, so you will always again work in your development system. So you'll again do the configuration in your development system, then move to your quality, then to production. Okay. So all the configurations or a customizing that you do will always be in your development system. Clear? For example, maybe setting up of your plants or setting up of your sales organizations. We'll talk about them, all those, like, kind of the backend settings that are required. So you need to do it in the development server itself, or the development system that you will have. Okay. Then we have something called a master data. Master data is nothing but the data that would remain constant for let's say that would remain that will not change much. Like, let's say you have your customer will have an address. Let's say a customer is also, mostly it is a business to business scenario, right? Like, most of our transactions will be not with the end customer, but we'll have one business dealing with another customer, another business that we'll have. We call it as B2B, or if you're dealing directly with the end customers, then we call it as B2C, business to customers, right? So basically here, master data is for example, you have your customer, his address or his name or his email ID or his telephone number. These are the kind of data that does not change much. They may be changing once in a while where you update your master data, but it does not change much. It remains constant. And also, let's say material, you're selling some material, so your material code, your material description of it, or let's say the weight of a material or the unit of measure, all this data does not change much. They remain constant, throughout, for the most period of time. So any data that remains constant for a certain point of time, where there won't be any much change activities that would be happening, we call it as a master data. So the data that remains, we would say, a constant that would not change much, it's called as a master data. So you will have this master data that would be there, for example, the customer master or a material master. We'll talk about them in detail again, when we come to the topic, but as of now, just giving you a high level overview. and so on and so forth. And the transaction data is nothing but it's a transaction data is a day-to-day activities that are carried out by the users. So they carry out the users, for example, creation of inquiries, creation of quotations, or the sales orders, or the inventory team creating the outbound deliveries, or creating some invoices, following up with the customers to receive the payments. All these kind of or will be the transaction data that would be there. So these are all the day-to-day activities that would be performed by the users. Okay, so these are all the kind of three different kind of data that you will have in your SAP system. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Clear, right? We'll again talk about them in detail when we actually get into the system. You will understand much more detail, but as of now you'll have to just remember a basic overview about what kind of data that we will have, what is a development server, what is a quality server, what is a production server. All these are kind of, it's kind of gist of everything that we are just covering in order for you to understand when we proceed ahead. So the terms and what we'll be discussing will be clear for you. Okay, so this is what I wanted to give you on a high level understanding about the system, about the architecture wise, like what that you need to do and what we will be there in this system. But what we do next now will be basically we will now just get into the SAP system to understand. There are a few other things also that you need to understand, to understand something called a menu that you get in here. So for example, like I'll just go outside, I'll try to log in back, maybe in one of the user access that I have. Okay, uh, so whenever you log into your SAP system, okay, so always remember you have here something called, on top of it, that you have the first row that you have, right? This is the first row that you have here. Whenever you log into your system, you log into something called an easy access menu, SAP easy access menu. This easy access menu is where the end user will work on, that is where the business users will work on this menu. All their transaction data or the master data would be there in this menu. Okay, then again we will discuss about how can we access the menu that the consultant will work on in some time. But first let's try to understand the different options that we have here. The first row here, that we call it as a menu bar. So this menu bar will have, like the menu of it, then it has some edit, it has some favorites that you can add. There are some technical information of certain documentations and all it will have. But all this information that you will have about some systems, we will see some of those details in the coming. But try to understand, when you log into an SAP system, on top that you have, it's called as a menu bar. So it's called as a menu bar that you will have. And the second here, the second row that you have, you call it as a standard toolbar. So this is kind of a standard toolbar that you have. Okay, and the third one that you have here, it's called as a title bar that you will have. Guys, just give me 2 minutes, there is a background noise, just give me 2 minutes. Okay. All right, so we'll just continue. So you have something called a standard toolbar that you will have. Then afterwards, next you have something called a title bar. So whenever you execute any of the transaction codes, you can see, for example, I'll just go to just go to something transaction. So you will have some title that gets displayed here. For example, customer display initial screen that you have here, or SAP easy access menu. Or if I just go to another, just giving example, if I go to some other transaction, you say display material. So this is called a title. So the third row is called as a title bar that you will have here, and the fourth row that you have is called a toolbar, like where you will have some other options. Then the fifth and last, there will be something called a status bar. Once you create, at the bottom you will get something called a status, that will be get, so it's called a status bar that you will have. So basically in your SAP logon, once you log on to your system, so you will have the first one that on the top of the screen, that the first row that is called as menu bar. First row that you call it as a menu bar, where you will have some options of the menus, the edit, the favorites, and all that you will have. Then you will have something called a standard toolbar, is your second row. And the third row is called the title bar. Then the fourth row is called your title bar. Then the fourth row is called your toolbar. And the fifth row that you will have, the fifth and the last row, the fifth and the last row, or the last, I'll say the last row that you will have is called status bar. When we create it, you will see where the status bar, how the status comes and all. Once you create some activity, it gets saved and it gives you something called a status at the bottom, which is known as the status bar that you will have in the bottom. Okay, so these are all the different, let's say, these are the kind of different rows, and you just need to know, this helps you to say, okay, go to the menu bar. If you're telling someone, they understand, okay, menu bar means what, or just on your title bar or on your toolbar you have a find. So like, to explain them, it would be much more easier if you understand this terminology, like a menu bar or a standard toolbar or a title bar or a toolbar, or a status bar that you'll have. Clear? And again, to log on to your SAP system, so basically, like, you will be receiving something called a GUI file. You'll be receiving something called an SAP logon GUI, 740 or 750 or 760, depends upon what you have. So you will be installing the SAP GUI. So you log on to you will have this icon kind of that would be saved in. So you double click on this, you get into this menu. Then you need to install your server. So basically there will be server access that will be provided for you guys. So once you install them, you double click on that, you log in. Then you will see something called a client, which should be fixed. It will not be, you cannot have, you'll have access to a particular client. Then you'll have your user ID, then you'll have your password, then a logon language that you need to enter. Basically it's English for us. By default it would be there. So once it is done, once you click on that, then you enter this particular menu, and the first menu that you have here is called an easy access menu. And these are all the different rows that has different titles to it, as I mentioned before. So this is called an easy access menu. Easy access menu is the menu that would be worked by the end users for creation of master data and for the transaction data that they would have. And anything a consultant will work is called as an IMG menu. So what we work as a consultant is called an IMG menu or a SPRO menu. So this here, right? So here there's a gap. So this is where you can enter a transaction code directly. Like, if you know the shortcut code of it, you can enter it directly, or you need to go through a menu. For example, if I need to go where exactly the consultants will work on, then you go to this tools, then you click on this customizing. You just need to expand them, huh? These are all close. Like, if you click on this icon that you have here, triangle, it will expand. So expand them, then go here, ABAP workbench customizing. You click on this customizing, then you have something called an IMG. You expand this IMG, then you have something called an SPRO, exclude project. So you click on this SPRO, then again click on this display IMG. Then this is called an IMG menu, display IMG, or you call it as an SPRO menu. So this is the menu where the consultants will work on. So the MM consultant will work on his MM, for example, just to show you. We will talk about it in detail later. So sales and distribution consultant will work on the sales and distribution. Here it says all our configurations will be there under this. Then the material management person will work under his menu that he will have, and the quality maintenance person will work under his menu. The production will work under his menu. The project planning and everything, they work under this menu. The project systems will work on their menu. The finance and controlling will work on their menu. So everyone has their own dedicated menu inside this IMG where we will be working on. There are certain things that are common between the integration points and all. We will have a separate menu. We'll discuss about it later. But as of now, just to give you an understanding, this IMG menu is a menu worked by the IT people, to set up. In order, if you set up everything in this IMG menu, then the users will be able to do their transaction and the master data in this easy access menu. They will be able to do the transaction codes. So in order to access our IMG menu, how you have to go? So there will be here, once you log in, the first screen that appears is a easy access menu that you will have. Under this easy access menu, go to the tools, go to the customizing, go to the IMG, click on this SPRO, click on the SAP IMG. This is where you come to this particular menu. And if you say okay, accessing this, and if you know the direct transaction code, transaction means like a shortcut key to enter here, then you can directly enter in this bar that is provided. So because I know the transaction code to enter, for example, here if I just go here IMG, it is mentioned SPRO. So SPRO, basically here it is the first one is coming as a transaction code that you will have. Okay, I know that SPRO is the transaction code, so I go here, I'll directly enter SPRO. If I click on SPRO and press enter and click on this IMG, so it will take me directly to the menu. So I don't need to go through this path that you have. So there will be a path where you can go, but every time you don't need to path, you can just remember a transaction code. So you can directly go into the transaction code without going to a particular path. So which is a much more faster way of accessing the menu. Clear so far? How do you access? Because this is important. People who are already familiar with SAP screen, it might be an easy thing, but if in case you're not familiar with an SAP screen, then you should be knowing how to access this particular menu. So this is an easy access menu. There are two menus you can remember: an easy access menu and an SPRO menu or an IMG menu. Easy access menu is where the users will work on, and all your transaction data or the master data will be part of your easy access menu, and all your customizing and the configurations will be part of your IMG menu or an SPRO menu. Clear?